appeared to be a kind of judicial system. I mean, a lot of priests figure it that way in order to frighten people. But karma means simply, if you die in a plane crash or have a heart attack, it's your doing. But that simply means you've got to rethink what you mean by doing. Now, I've already proved to you that black is white. So now I'm going on to prove to you that what you do is what happens to you, and what happens to you is what you do. Because you can't tell the difference between doing, you can't tell what you mean by doing unless something happens to you, to contrast with you, and vice versa. You can't say of something that happens to you unless it feels different from something you do. Now let's take a look at our breath. Are you doing, or does it happen to you? It's a little breathing exercise. You can feel I'm doing it. I'm breathing in just as I might raise my hand. But after a while I breathe out. I feel I'm breathing out. And I forget all about it. It goes on. And it happens to me. That's why in yoga, yoga means union, joining, same as the Latin jungere. Why in yoga you breathe. Breathing is the main thing in yoga, because it's to teach you that there's no difference between what you do and what happens to you. You learn that through breathing. You can make the very best breath. See, we get into Christian terms here. The Holy Spirit means breath. Spiritus in Latin, pneuma in Greek, ruach in Hebrew. Breath. Now, there's ordinary breath. When most people's normal breathing. Or forced breath, when when people try to sing, their voice is forced. But then the next breath is called Holy Spirit, holy breath. That's when the breath is no longer forced, it happens. When it's nirvana breath, blow out, same thing as Holy Spirit. And then that is unforced. Go on and on. So that's why when monks chant, or devotees of any kind chant, they have the idea that I am a flute, and the breath, the prana, the spiritus of the divine flows through it. That's what chanting is all about. Make yourself attuned to the divine wind. But that also means realize the unity of the voluntary and the involuntary. That's really what's meant by doing the will of God. Do the will. One reason why we get confused in English as to whether we mean will or whether we mean shall. I will drown and no one shall save me. So, think, behind what you call voluntary, You decide. Having reviewed the evidence, I have decided it would be best to buy this brand of detergent. Made a decision. How did you make a decision? Well, I reviewed the evidence, I added up the price, and I came to the I know all that. How did you work the machinery? The computer in your head. You know, you pushed all these buttons, but what's underneath the button? Oh, I don't know, I never looked. So you see that involuntary growth called the brain underlies your voluntary decision. Because when you decide, you don't first decide to decide, and decide to decide to decide. You just decide. That means there's something else behind it. Well, you think that's terrible, because if what I do happens to me, and it isn't really doing at all, then I'm in a fatalistic scene. Yes, but I said, on the other hand, what happens to you is what you do. It works equally that way. You know, you have an earthquake. And the thoughts in your head drift about like clouds in the sky. But you can't do anything. So in the same way, this whole strain, the futility of the strain to make right win and to improve the world, that entire futility, the frustration of it is what you mean by I. Now it goes. It won't work, and the I collapses. Everybody is terrified of this happening. Suddenly finding out that you don't have anything. Heaven preserve me from that, because I've been building up this personality of mine all these years. I've been very carefully nurtured this personality. You tell me it doesn't exist? No, because your personality is a phantom even more insubstantial than your body. Personality is a work of art. It's like music. It vanishes as soon as it's played.
This is part of a series of seminars on the future. And last weekend, we were discussing the very nature of time. And I want to give a sort of summary of what we were talking about before going into this particular weekend's discussion, which is the future of communication. Last weekend, we discussed the idea that history, the notion of human life as a kind of progressive system that is beginning from the old, the primitive, the worn out, the stupid, and going on progressively to greater and greater attainments, the wise, the good, the successful, and so on. But this is a very dangerous illusion. That insofar as we feel we are participating in and improving human life through the course of history, we are actually destroying ourselves. Because everything that so far, through technology and through the accumulation of human skill, we call the increase of our powers, is leading us to destruction. Not because technology in itself is a bad thing, but because the spirit in which it is used is a spirit of man against the universe, man against nature. And man has to realize that he is an integral part of nature, that he is just as much a natural form as a seagull or a wave or a mountain. And if he doesn't realize that, he uses his technical powers to destroy his environment, to foul his own nest. And so when you look at a great modern city like Los Angeles, and you see the absolute ruination of what used to be a very lovely natural scene, full of citrus trees and sunshine, now turned into a smoggy slum. So the Los Angelization instead of civilization of the world is a result of having a sense of our own existence which is contrary to the facts. That is to say, we're all trained by our parents, by our teachers, by our peer groups to experience our own existence as an ego in a capsule of skin, confronted by an external world which is not ourselves, definitely not, and that this external world is something that really threatens us because we've been brought up to the idea that basically it's mechanism. It's a stupid, unintelligent manifestation of energy. Right out in the farthest galaxies, it's nothing but fire and gas. Nearer to us, it's nothing but water and rock. And it's full of buzzing insects and other organisms that are inferior to the human status, and therefore something that's not to be trusted at all. And we have been brought up to the idea that we come into this scene as if we were complete strangers to it. We are born by an accident of bad rubber goods or something like that. And we arrive in this and confront it like that. See? It's outside there. And this is a hallucination. All this is a complete fantasy. Official people in psychiatry complain about hallucinatory states induced by LSD and so on and so forth, but they are nothing. They are nothing in their hallucinations compared with the hallucination of being a skin-encapsulated ego. One is not that. For example, it's a very, very, very simple. A human being exists by virtue of living in a world where there are plants, where there is air, where there is water, where there is sun and its temperature. And plants imply insects and grubs. They can't live without them. And grubs imply birds. And birds imply fish. And so on and so on. It all fits together so that you are patterns. Every living organism is a pattern of something which is inseparable from the pattern of everything else that is going on. So that you could say, you as a living human organism are something that the whole universe is doing at the point of space and time which you call here and now. You are not separate. You flow into all that surrounds you in exactly the same way that your head goes with your feet. See, they're inseparable. When you were born, you weren't put together like one constructs an automobile, screwing on this bit and screwing on that bit and so on. You beautifully grew, head and feet together, all of one piece, from your mother's womb.
Defines the type of voice heard, screen reader voice.
And in exactly the same way that your head and your feet are related together. So you go with, I want to get this word into the English language, go with. Instead of cause and effect, instead of that mechanical understanding of the world, which was Descartes and Newton, they thought of the world as billiards. You hit a ball and it goes, and it hits that ball like that, you see. And they thought of cause and effect. You don't need to use that concept at all. Go with. Just as a front goes with the back, just as a top goes with the bottom, just as up goes with down, they're inseparable. So in exactly that way, you go with everything that you call the external world. And therefore you have to treat the external world as if it were as much you as your own foot. Or your own head. It's part of you. It is you. There's no way of separating. Therefore you have to be very kind and reverent and respectful to the mountains, to the forests, and so on. The water, the fish. You, for example, live on fish, just as birds live on worms. And if you kill any creature in order to live, you have a duty towards it. That is to say, you must not exterminate the species on which you live. People have, for example, in the whaling industry, they have practically exterminated whales. And it's becoming a very serious situation because you must farm, cultivate every species on which you feed. If all worms were to be eaten by the birds would have no further sustenance. From the worm's point of view, if all birds were to vanish, the worms would overpopulate themselves and starve themselves. So the worms depend on the birds just as much as the birds depend on the worms. So we all depend on the whole interaction of the system of biology. It's a mutual eating society. You may say that's too bad, that life has to involve this crunching and crushing and annihilation of other creatures. But that's the way it is.
Run!
Therefore, if that's the way it is, way to do it properly is, number one, farm instead of merely destroy.
Just keep running.
Be assured the species you feed on is the pain that it goes
Are you
on.
out of your mind?
Farm
He's not
the whales,
going to
don't
make it.
trust them.
He has to.
Blessed Nagarat, my
That's the
eternal
first
life protects me.
The second
Thy
principle,
divine
whenever
Look at me.
you
All the gold we want.
destroy a living body
There.
for your own
Oh,
maintenance,
I just came here.
give it the honor of cooking as beautiful as possible.
I know. Now, bring
Fish
the seal.
that
Get us
has
through
died
that
for
door.
you and is not well cooked has died in vain. I'm quoting the New Times. So this is the situation in which we find ourselves. Life is a system in which
My
organisms,
three, they come.
by mutual
My
eating,
three,
transform
open
fish into people,
blood.
grass into people, lettuce into people,
Doesn't make any
cows
sense.
into people. What about people? What do they transform?
Blood.
We
Blood is the key.
are proud, too
Blood
proud.
is the key!
We try to resist our transformation.
I told you!
Therefore, we have a wretched profession, morticians.
So,
Otherwise
it says
known
that
as
the blood of the willing goes...
Who try to embalm us,
gotta be
preserve
kidding me.
us, and put us in concrete and bury us, instead of letting us simply join the biological. Actually, what should happen to us dead is that they should be buried 3 feet underground with no casket, nothing,
We have to help him!
He's
naked in
dead
the earth.
already.
And that field should be allowed to lie fallow. Beautifully fertilized by human bodies, and crops would grow up. They always say that the best wheat is grown on old battlefields.
Oh well, cheer up. Gold splits better 3 ways instead of 4.
But you see, we resist that. And the morticians will put an ad in with some girl who's lost her husband looking out of the window on a rainy day. They say, trust us, he's not rotting really, you know. We've got that concrete thing, we've got that extra special covering, that super embalming, and the corpse is still there.
The Creator.
Baby, don't worry.
Hail the daughter of...
You know, how mad can you get? How insane.
What
how
about the
ridiculous.
coin? What's it say?
This is forbidden. This is a summoning. I cannot speak.
The
Don't
root
lie
of this
to me.
kind
We came here for treasure.
serpent,
What is this place?
I
of
don't know.
feeling that you are
Maybe it's a tip.
separate inside your skin.
Or a tomb.
And
or-
not simply all one process with everything that's going on. The root of this is a failure of communication. If I want to talk about
Is the key.
one of the funny things that occurs to me straight off is that the subject of communication is really the same subject as life. Life is communication. But let's take the subject of advertising. Life is advertising. Because the moment, what is advertising doing? Advertising is trying to promote somebody's gain, somebody's existence, somebody's biological reality, because he's maintaining himself by selling something. And he advertises himself as the
By
seller.
3 thy
So
way.
one could say that all life,
By the blood of the
That-
willing.
everybody advertises himself as something.
We call
Or take another
thee
subject,
home.
strategy, military strategy. All life can be seen as a form
Come.
of strategy. Any major
Open your eyes.
department of human life that we classify, we can call it business, we can call it strategy, we can call it advertising, we can
There
call
is
it
no light.
communication. But we can see all life
to the darkness
as that.
for knowledge.
How then are we going to define communication as a particular human activity, as distinct from other activities? What is the difference between communication and architecture? What is the difference between communication and playing on the stock market?
Speak the word.
What is the difference between communication and
Call her
football?
home.
These are very, very difficult things to define because there is no difference.
By three,
Football is a form of communication.
by
Sex
three,
is a form of communication.
thy way opens
There isn't anything that we
Like
do
the
that
blood
isn't a form of
of the
communication.
willing.
And therefore you may say, why talk about
We call
communication?
thee
Because it's everything anyhow.
home.
So in order to define the field, I'm going to talk about communication. More narrow. Communication is language. Communication is
Hail,
the world
daughter
of symbols.
of hatred.
It's true, sexual intercourse
Created.
is a form of but I'm not going to
sanctuary.
include that sort of activity in what we're going to discuss. What I'm going to talk
Hey.
about is the way in which human beings use noises like words
Lilith.
and symbols like numbers to represent the things which go on in the material and physical world. If you take a glass of water and you drink it and you taste that, see, that is an event in the physical universe. But the word water is also in the physical universe because it's a sound. But that particular sound, water, is used in a way that is peculiar. It is used to represent that transparent liquid that you drink. So alongside the physical universe of people and everything that's going on, there is another universe that we have invented of words and signs and numbers that represent the physical world. And we are very, very preoccupied with this symbolic world. And we very often confuse it with what it represents. Especially this is true in the United States of America. This is a country, a nation, a culture which is devoted in a most peculiar way to symbols. Not so long ago, the Congress of the United States